Welcome to InTimeTV's Healthcare Executive Show. I'm Christine Midgen, your host, and today we're going to talk about physician adoption of emerging clinical and information technologies. My guest is Ogan Gorel. Welcome back, Ogan. I'm glad you could make it.
Glad to be here, Christine.
We have a lot to talk about. I think it's going to be interesting for executives to hear about what physicians deal with and when they adopt new technologies, and I think it's really important for them to understand the physician mindset.
Exactly.
And then we could talk about those challenges and then what executives can do to ensure that adoption is more successful.
Right, and you know, we talked last time, and it's a pleasure to be back, about some of those emerging clinical technologies. We focus on the clinical technologies, but some of the aspects of physician adoption relate to information technologies. We kind of left the whole aspect of physician adoption till later, till today.
Right.
To the extent that that's a whole big topic. So we talked about the emerging clinical technologies, evolving clinical technologies, drug-eluting stents, stem cell technologies, minimally invasive approaches, surgical robotics. We talked about all those. And then there's, of course, the whole realm of information technologies, EMR, PACS, picture archiving systems, physician order entry systems, and so on and so forth. But all of these are great, but ultimately, if they're not adopted by physicians, first of all, they're not adopted. Second of all the promise of this technology, patient benefit, cost reduction, and so forth, quality improvement, doesn't happen. Is lost. It doesn't happen.
And so, a lot of money is spent.
That's right.
By facilities.
So I would say physician adoption is probably, there are many aspects to these technologies. First of all, obviously assessing their validity and all that, the cost, the technical aspects. But I would say of all of these, physician adoption is probably what we say in chemistry. Being a physician myself, like yourself, we learn in chemistry the rate-determining step. I really think that that is the big challenge, is physician adoption, certainly with information technologies. And the reason why it's so difficult is that the physician mindset is very unique in that regard. Well, it's not unique necessarily to physicians, but I think it's important to get into that mindset. I'm reminded of a movie, a very funny movie, Mel Gibson movie called What Women Want. I don't know if you or people in the audience have seen that.
I have seen it.
Yeah, it's a very funny movie, but I think there was a very important lesson to that. And I'll just briefly summarize it because I think it encapsulates what we want to talk about. So Mel Gibson is an advertising executive, and he got some new contract or something of that sort, selling some products to women. And he's quite smart. He said, as an advertising executive, I don't know about the other aspects, but as an advertising executive, and he said, I want to get into the mind of women, what women want. So he started to do makeup, put on pantyhose, do waxing, and all the things that women do. And it's a whole comedy built around that. But the takeaway was he was trying to get into their mind to sell to them and to convince them. And I think that that is part of the challenge with physician adoption, in that there's often, and I think this has happened sometimes through the education of healthcare executives, a us versus them mentality between the hospital executives and the doctors. And I'll give a little background behind that. As you know, Medicare, since the early 60s, has had Medicare Part A and Part B. And one part is for the hospitals, the hospital fee, technical fee. The other part is the professional fees. And they're all competing for the same pie. So even though everyone likes to say we're all friends and everything, there almost is an implicit competition. And that pervades a lot of doctor-hospital interactions. And then you even have more subtle things, but the Stark laws and so forth, where physicians have to stay away from hospitals, and we've even had, in terms of healthcare IT, some modification of those regulations, so anti-kickback provisions in terms of EMR payments to doctors by hospitals. But that being said, there's an element of distrust, you know, whether it's genuine or imposed from the outside, and lack of collaboration between the hospitals and the physicians. And I think we'll address that later, how to overcome that. But it's something really ingrained in the system where there's an us versus them, even though a lot of people say otherwise. There is a competition, and that, of course, doesn't help physician adoption.
I think often